Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Demystifying Workflow Automation. We will be getting started shortly, but first, I want to take a minute to go over the format of today's webinar. All phones have been placed on mute. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the Questions tab in the menu. We will address questions at the end of the webinar as time permits. We will also be recording this session, and the recording will be sent out tomorrow. Again, thank you for joining us. At this point, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. As the firm's Chief Innovation Officer, Michael Pelletier helps clients strive for excellence and ingenuity in an ever-changing world. Michael also leads Bloom's Technology Advisory Group, where he consults with a range of businesses and industries on issues related to technology strategy and direction, enterprise and solution architecture, cloud computing, and digital transformation. Michael's experience spans many disciplines, including communication and collaboration solutions, workflow, system integration, machine learning, and custom application development across a variety of industries, with particular strengths in insurance, manufacturing, biotech, and professional services. I'd now like to hand it over to Michael to begin today's presentation.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I look forward to the time we have together here today to talk about workflow automation and really at the end of the day, sort of process excellence. How do we, as a business, take some of those work processes that we have and make them more usable, more automated, more transparent, more trackable, etc. So today we're going to focus on understanding what workflow automation is, go through a couple of case studies where we've done some of these types of projects for clients of ours, and then finish up with a simple walkthrough of a workflow that I created for this presentation here today that will hopefully give you a sense of how easy it can be to use some of the tools that we have to create these workflows and automate your business. So Jared, did the overview of who I am. As a firm, our focus is on helping our clients focus on their business. In other words, if you're in the business of manufacturing, the world's greatest widget, that does not necessarily mean that you need to spend all of your time and resources on having the world's best finance department or IT department or HR department. Those are necessary evils, but that's not really what sets your company apart. It's the products you make and how you interact with your customer. And so we like to focus on a lot of those things behind the scenes that kind of make your business operate so that you can focus on your business mission. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is what in the world is workflow. So whether you're an individual or a business, there's a variety of tasks that you may need to complete on a daily basis. I like to think of a simple workflow solution as being email. We all get email. The email tells us something. Sometimes it requires us to take action. Sometimes it's just informing us. But email really isn't a very good usable technology for kind of tracking things. No one else can see my email. So if we had a way to provide some greater transparency on some of the business processes that I and others may be involved with, it can certainly help a business run more effectively. Ideally, help push it forward and streamline things so that we can keep pace with the ever-changing world that we're working in. So we're going to focus on what workflow is, why it matters, and how some of these automation tools work. So to give you a sense of what we mean when we talk about workflow, there's really a couple different kinds of workflows, and we like to think of them as big workflows and small workflows. So on the left here is a good example of a big workflow. What I mean by that is it looks complex. It is complex. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of systems involved. It's something that if you wanted to try to automate, you possibly could. But it would likely require a significant amount of technology, a significant amount of time and talent and cost to develop it and get it right. Now, it's not to say that you can't automate something like this. You certainly can. But there's a lot of other scenarios in your business that might be better to focus on when you're getting started with workflow. And that are those smaller processes. So there's a lot of small processes that exist in a business, and some of those smaller ones, those everyday tasks, are equally important in helping your business continue to move forward. If you have an expense that needs to be approved, for example, or a new employee to onboard, that's not a very complex process per se, but it is a very important and integral process to the success of your business. So when performing these types of tasks, it's oftentimes challenging for an individual to kind of keep up and keep on top of what's going on in the business. So by focusing on some of these simpler processes and looking at these smaller tasks, we can help a business move the ball forward. So what are some of these smaller, simple processes? Some examples include the routing of expense reports, the approval of leave requests, whether it's provision in a new employee, which I mentioned earlier, reviewing a proposal, assessing an equipment purchase. These are all basic, fundamental business processes, but they're absolutely critical to the everyday function of your business. So if you had a way to automate some of these things, that would likely provide some benefit. Think about safety inspections. As a business, the process of completing a safety inspection is very critical, especially if you're in a regulated industry. And too often we've seen a business that's tracking something like this on a spreadsheet. Maybe they're even still manually filling out a paper form, and it's impossible to ensure that you've gotten the full completed record documented in a situation such as a safety inspection without having some system kind of governing it and managing it. But who wants to implement a fully complete custom bespoke safety inspection system? You may have a need but not have it be the core focus of your business. So that's one example where a very small, simple process can have a significant impact. Around expense reports, if you're a business that is very expense report heavy, where you have those expense reports as part of the billing process for the work that you're doing for your client, be it an architectural firm, law firm, or other professional services organization, maybe you have a large sales force. Those expense reports are a core component of how you end up billing your customer. And if those expense reports aren't in the system and aren't in the system today, the ability for you to bill the costs associated with that are lost. And so those getting them approved and getting those dollars into the system can have a significant impact on your ability to collect on those incidentals. And then finally, as more and more organizations are jumping into the social media pool, being able to screen the content that someone might looking to be published on your Twitter feed or your LinkedIn site is something that, again, very simple workflow process, not a lot of steps, not a lot of complexity, but can have a significant impact to your business. You get one wrong thing put out there, and it can be a black eye and have a significant negative impact to your business's image. So when we look at these everyday processes, they all have something in common. One is that they can originate from anywhere in the organization. It's not like your standardized ERP process, if you will, where I have an order that's getting entered into the system, and then once that order is in the system, it then goes to manufacture, and then fulfillment, and then delivery, and so forth. These are things that can occur anywhere in the business. They also represent the lifeblood of the procedures that make your company run. They are some of those core critical activities that, again, aren't represented in your GL, aren't represented in your order management system. And they can often distract people from the real work. The need to complete that form, the need to participate in that process, can often distract someone from getting the real work done that they need to. And so making it easy for them, making it less of a chore is something that can have a significant impact on them getting completed. So because they are a distraction, because they are often overlooked, they can often lead to mistakes. These simple processes aren't given the attention that they need. The email, if that's how you're currently handling the workflow, is something that no one has insight on other than yourself. So it's very easy to get overlooked. When you add all of this up, it's a significant amount of time and money that a business is potentially leaving on the table, be that for mistakes or missed opportunities. And this this is often a situation that results in them being ignored because they're not considered worth the time of traditional business process optimization, because they're not considered central, they're not considered big enough. And that's really what I'm hoping that you kind of take away from this conversation today, is that we don't need to focus on the order to cash process, right? That's a big process, and there's probably a lot involved in that. Or the procure to pay process, again, a very big process. These are those smaller things that exist everywhere in the business that can if we can automate, can have a significant impact. So when you expand your thinking on what workflow automation is, and think about it not just around those complex processes, but also those everyday processes, there's three big benefits. First, you get a much greater chance of success. It's a lot easier to solve a simple, small problem than it is to solve a really big problem. And so, anytime you're in a business, you talk about change management, you talk about adoption, a lot of times the success of an initiative is brought about not based on the technical grandioseness of it, but how well it's adopted by the business community. And a simple process that's easy to create, easy to test, easy to deploy, there's a much greater chance of success than a wholesale, large, all-encompassing change. They're often less complex. So taken one at a time, it increases the chance that the person who is responsible for that process is actively involved in its automation. These are things that are designed to help a specific person. So whether it's someone in the HR department or someone in the IT department, they have a greater sense of ownership around this because it's something that directly affects them. And it therefore isn't just farmed out to a developer to create it for them, because that ends up requiring a lot of communication and explanation. It kind of gets handed off, so the ownership is lost a little bit. So by having the end user, the business owner involved, it's oftentimes more realistic that it'll get accomplished appropriately. And then finally, they train users and your entire business really how to think about workflow solutions. And so you get a few things out there, and very quickly you'll start having conversations. You'll be in a meeting where you're talking about some HR or marketing or finance issue, and 6 months ago you would have thrown your arms up and said, I don't know how we deal with this, let's just create a spreadsheet and keep track of it. Now you'll be in that same setting, and you'll have an individual at the end of the table that says, well, what if we created a workflow around this? And it starts to open up conversation that, because you've had a few of these small successes out there, really starts to spur ideas and really innovation within the business. So what happens when work flows? You get more done in less time with less hassle. you can expand the impact of every team. You can do more good. It's amazing, that once you have some of these workflows in place, it makes those processes flow more seamlessly. Every business, or at least many of the businesses that we work with, including ourselves, has a process that they've created for charitable contributions. And I can't tell you how many times we've been in these conversations where somebody says, hey, did anybody ever approve that request for the $500 donation to XYZ charity? And the answer is, well, no, because it kind of got lost. So aside from doing good in your own business, we've seen examples with some of our clients where they're doing good in the community because they've automated a simple process of a charitable contribution request. So it kind of works both ways. You can focus on your mission. So as I mentioned at the outset of this discussion, we're really focused on helping our clients focus on their business. And by taking away some of the noise and automating some of these small processes, you can better focus on your business and your mission. You can expand. So as I mentioned, the ability to kind of think differently once you have some of these in place lets you think about solving different varied problems. And it allows you to work most on what matters. And so quite frankly, that's why we are in this business. We have spent the last 5 or 6 years working with workflow technologies, working with our clients to help them create these solutions, because outside of the fact that it's relatively quick and easy, you can get a lot more value out of a solution like this that you can in many other custom development types of scenarios. So before we get into a demo, I wanted to go through a couple of case studies. So these are not hypothetical situations like we just kind of went through. Many of those were drawn from actual real life solutions we created. But these are a bit more detailed drill downs into some of the work that we've done for some of our clients. So this first one is with a global electrical manufacturer, a very large company. They make electrical components. And I just picked a couple of different workflows that we created for them. So one was around the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So they needed to make sure that as they are a global organization, that their controllers understood what the FCPA policy was and that they were adhering to it. The current approach that they had in place was hard to manage, hard to track, hard to ensure completion, because like many businesses, they were sending around emails to the controllers and having them reply as to whether or not they read the document, and then they had to manually sign something, and it was a very disconnected process, and was hard to know whether they had full compliance. So our solution was to use the Nintech platform, which is the workflow platform that we've been using for, as I mentioned, the last 5-6 years. And we created a form that was filled out annually by the controllers and the general managers that outlined what the FCPA policy was and ensured that they understood it. They had to enter some basic information into it so we could track it. And then it was submitted for approval. Once they submitted that document, it went through a simple workflow process where it was reviewed and approved by the HR department and the legal department. Once it was approved by both of those departments, the data that was captured in the form was put into a Word document using the document generation feature within Nintech. And then that was saved to a document library and a folder for the current year for safekeeping. So that if anyone ever said, hey, do you have the document for such and such an employee regarding their adherence to FCPA, the appropriate HR legal staff can go to the document library and grab that document. So what were the benefits? It consolidated a business process that was quite disconnected. It was hard to achieve compliance, and they were able to get 100% compliance without gaps, and they were able to automate the completion and document creation process, which also saved time and effort on behalf of their HR and legal departments. So again, there's not a really complex process here, but it was a very simple scenario that had a significant impact on the business with respect to their ability to remain compliant. Another was a credit line approval form. So they had a wide and varied network of customers, and anytime a new customer came along or an existing customer requested an additional credit line, the individual who was getting that request was certainly not in a position to approve it. So they needed a simple way to route these requests to the appropriate people based on locale, division, and a few other factors. The current process was very slow and cumbersome. Again, it was done via email. It was a spreadsheet. So someone would fill out the credit line approval spreadsheet. They might attach a couple of documents to it, and then it would get sent to someone via email. And at that point, the original creator or requester of the credit line approval had no idea where it was going. They didn't know where it was in the process. They didn't know if it was waiting on a signature from someone. They just didn't know. And so aside from the original requester not knowing, once it was completed, it was difficult to have any sort of audit trail around that to know affirmatively who approved a particular credit line. And so aside from those issues and how slow it was to kind of get this process completed, it then led to unhappy customers because they would complain and say, well, we work with vendor X and we're able to get a credit approval in a matter of minutes. Why is this taking days? So the solution was to transition the complex Excel form into a dynamic Nintex form that was streamlined and focused just on the values that need to be collected based on the specific customer scenario. We created a workflow that sat behind that routed the approval requests dynamically based on an external responsibility and limit list in SharePoint. So we created a list within SharePoint that kept track of all of the people and their roles within the division and within the geography and what their approval value ceilings were, and used that to dynamically look up who the next person that needed to approve something was in the process. And then we also implemented the lazy approval. So lazy approval is a feature within the Nintex platform that essentially allows someone to reply to an email with approved, rejected, or similar language that allows someone to kind of handle these requests without going into a system, without going into SharePoint, or without having to look at a big screen. They could do it right from their phone if they wanted to. Now this is different than using a mobile form capability, which is something that we also took advantage of for other situations. But in this case, it's simply using the mail client on your phone, on your computer, to reply back with approved, and like that, it's done. So that kept it moving even for those busy execs. So at the end of the day, the customer was happy because they didn't need to wait days or weeks to get approval. There was audit history of the decision-making process, and detailed information about that client was able to be used to address falsification claims after the fact. So it really tightened up the process and made it a lot easier for the end users to move this request through the appropriate channels to get the dollars approved for their customers so they could continue to do business and, again, focus on the core business activity. The next set of case studies is focused around a pharmaceutical manufacturer. So this manufacturer, global again in nature, they had a number of different processes that we focused on for them. One was a new hire and termination form solution. So they had a desire to create a standard new hire and termination form and workflow for tracking purposes. We integrated it with DocuSign, which they were using for other areas of their business, so that once the appropriate content was created, it would basically do a mail merge, create those templates in DocuSign, send them out for signature electronically, and then we'd get those documents back and save them into SharePoint as the signed PDFs. It was a very nice, simple, straightforward process that cut down on a lot of the manual paperwork and helped them to track their new hires and terminations more easily. Another simple example that we did with them was to track changes requested in their GLs. They were using Oracle. They had requests that would come from various parts of the business to create or change account codes. So, for example, if the marketing department was going to be running some type of new campaign for a particular kind of drug, they wanted to be able to create a GL code to track that project, if you will, within the system. But they couldn't simply go in and create it themselves. They needed to have finance approve it and create it for them. So we created a simple form and a simple workflow that allowed them to submit a request with up to 10 different changes per form that could then be approved and implemented by their finance department. Likewise, there are needs that the IT department gets, or has rather, from end users with respect to changes and whether or not those should be approved. So whenever there was any particular change requested in a system, it was sent to the appropriate individuals within IT to make sure that if one individual was requesting that some field be changed to something else, that there wasn't an impact in some other area of the business, and they had some control over that, so that not all end users could basically willy-nilly make requests and changes to core business systems. Another was a request to gain access to some of the financial systems. So while many systems, it's straightforward and easy to kind of provision a user in, say email, for example, that's something that IT can handle. It's a fairly straightforward process. With finance, there are additional controls, additional granularity levels from a security perspective that you want to make sure you have in place. And so if somebody wanted access to one of the finance applications, then they had to submit a form, detail what it was that they wanted to have accomplished, and that would go to finance, who would then approve or reject it and make the appropriate changes in the system. And then finally, a payment request form. They had a number of cases where outside of sort of the standard business process, there become a need to pay someone for something. And so if they had a need for that, they could submit a request, which would go to the finance department, who would then approve it, and that would issue the appropriate check, ACH payment or otherwise, to the appropriate party. So lots of simple cases that had real significant impact, on the business. So what I hope I do now is transition and basically walk through a simple demonstration that shows how you can create a simple business solution, in this case using SharePoint Online and Nintech's workflow for Office 365. Before I transition there, I thought I'd check in and see if we have any questions or anything of that sort at this time.
One question we have is, are these workflows and using this software something that could be integrated with other products such as Salesforce that was one of the examples.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to walk through a slide that kind of articulates sort of the overall, business proposition, value argument, if you will, for using a solution like this, and absolutely integration with other systems such as Salesforce. I'm going to show and demonstrate an integration with Yammer. The line of business products that you have can absolutely be integrated with. And in fact, we've created some solutions that will use the API that a particular system may expose, so that once it's approved by a given individual, we can directly send those data elements to a particular system to have that data get created where it needs to be, so that no one has to manually enter it in.
That's great. That's what we have for now. But again, if anyone does have any questions, please use the questions tab in the webinar software here, and we'll be able to get to them.
All right. So to tee things up, I'm going to, there we go. Okay. So to tee things up, I'm going to walk through a simple scenario that outlines for a given business a challenge they might have. So this particular business is GameHenge Incorporated. They manufacture widgets, and they have a need to make sure they track the new hire process so that the users can get set up by IT to get a phone number and an email address, and that they can then order business cards for people so they can start interacting with their customers. So I'll start this process off by showing you what the workflow that I've created looks like, and then we'll walk through the example of me creating a new request. So when you are working with the product, if you have a list like this new hire onboarding, to get to the Nintech's workflow or forms capabilities, it's as simple as clicking on Nintech's workflow or Nintech's forms, and it will pop open a display that allows you to create a new or edit an existing workflow. I've already done that here, and I've got a very simple workflow that I've created. Now you might say, wow, this doesn't look very simple. There's lots of boxes on here, but I'm going to walk you through it and explain why it is. So the very first thing that we do is we set the status of the workflow. So when we kick things off, if somebody's going to go look at the list where we created the item, they are going to want to know what state that workflow request is in. And so we're going to set the status. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to assign a task to someone. In this case, it's the IT department. So we're going to assign a task to the IT department to set up the phone number and the email address. Now, the IT department has the ability to either approve or complete that request or reject that request. So in this particular business, the IT department is responsible for keeping track of authorized, approved users, and if they get a request in for someone to provision a new email address and phone number that isn't on their list, then they won't approve it. But if it's good, then we go through this path here where they've completed it. We send an email out to the requester to let them know that process has been completed, and then we update the workflow status. Now, as I mentioned, this process also requires the creation of a business card. So we provide the ability for the end user to proof the business card to make sure that it looks good. And if it's not good, then we go down this rejected path. If it is good, then we go down the path of approving it. So it gets approved. We, again, update the workflow status. We'll then actually generate a document which represents the business card that we can send to a printer. and then we'll post a message to Yammer, and then our workflow completes. So again, very simple. Let's run through this one time just so you get a sense of how this all works. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to create a new item here. So I'm going to put in a last name and a first name, and I'm not going to fill in anything else except for the department, because I know that. Let's say they're in finance, and their job title is controller. I'm going to save. Now, as a result of saving that record just in a SharePoint list, that's all this is, just a custom SharePoint list, I have created and initiated a workflow. Now, for those of you that may not have any insight, SharePoint is a very popular product. It's part of the Office 365 platform that many businesses use. It provides a great range of capabilities for content management, collaboration, supports workflow, and we use it a lot to provide sort of the basis, the underpinnings, if you will, of the solutions that we create to automate business processes for our clients. I will note that the Nintex platform does run outside of, or rather can run separately from SharePoint. There isn't necessarily a requirement for it. Using the Nintech Workflow cloud platform, we choose to use SharePoint more often than not to initiate some of these processes. So if I just hit refresh here, you'll note that my onboard employee status is with IT setup. So if I go ahead and click on this, now I've gotten an email that has assigned me a task. Rather than kind of going through email and popping those up, I can just click on this, and I can see the task that was assigned to me. And the email would direct me to a page, and this page would look like this, where I can complete the task, indicating that I've put the information in. So let's go do that. Let's go edit this item here, and let's put in the email address. So I'm playing the role of IT now, and their phone number. Okay, and I'll hit save. So I, as the IT department, have completed my job. So I'm going to go mark this task as being completed. Okay, great. Now that I've completed that task, it's going to, again, send me an email letting me know that that task was completed. It is then also going to create the next task in the process, which is to create, or rather approve, the business card. So if I come back here and I refresh this, it was with IT setup. Now it's waiting on business card approval. So if I come back here, I'll just refresh this for you here. I've got another task that was assigned to me to approve the business card. Now, one thing to note is that I've got this all set up where I'm assigning these tasks to myself. That's simply for purposes of making running through this demonstration easier. You have the ability to assign these tasks to anyone to complete, and you can do so either statically or dynamically based on the particular business process you're trying to solve for. I happen to be doing it, just to me for purposes of the demo. Now, the one thing you'll notice as this page loads is that it looks a bit different. The other screen that I had was, just a bunch of text boxes, and it didn't look very nice. In fact, it looked kind of overwhelming. That's because I was just using a standard out-of-the-box SharePoint approval page, which you can use. There's no need to necessarily create something separate or special. But using Nintex Forms, which is part of the Nintex Workflow platform, I can create a custom form that I can use at point in time when I'm trying to carry out an approval task, such as I am here, or even to initiate the process. So I'm going to click on Approved, as I like how my business card looks. It's got my title, my department, email, phone. That's great. And so I'll click OK. And that will close out that task and bring me back to my workflow listing here. So now that I've completed my business card approval, if I come back to here and I refresh, it'll show me that the employee has been onboarded. Great. Now I have very clear direction, knowing that the employee onboarding process has been completed and that everything that needed to happen has happened. Now, if I go back to my home page here, and we look at business cards, okay, we can see that a new document was created. So a few seconds ago, this was created. And if I open this up, we can see that I have my business card in a Word document ready to get sent to the printer. Now, obviously, this is probably not the right format to go to a printer or anything of that sort, but the point is you have the ability to create templates using the document generation feature within Nintex, so that as part of the workflow process, I can use that template that maybe has some boilerplate sales information, some boilerplate contract information, boilerplate employee agreement information, whatever it happens to be that's part of the template. You know, the important thing is you want to be able to enter in the details of what it is that you need to customize in there. And in this case, I was customizing the business card. And so I was able to generate this document as part of that workflow process so that I could then easily send it off to the printer to get created. And that is, you know, really as simple as it gets. And then you'll note that I have a message that was posted to Yammer saying, "Please welcome Trey Anastasio." And anyone in my, in my business who is, participating in Yammer can see that announcement welcoming the new employee. So again, somewhat, contrived example. But it's a very simple process and something that you can obviously expand on, customize, to your business and make it make sense. So speaking of making it make sense, one of the things that maybe as a business we decided was that, well, not everyone needs a business card. Maybe I've got people in IT and people in finance, and they don't need business cards. Maybe it's just the people that are in the sales department or the marketing department that should get them, because they're going to be interacting with our customer and they should be able to hand out a business card. But why should I be buying business cards for just every employee? Well, it's really easy to make customizations to a workflow that you've created. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go to the section where we're going to proof the business cards. So before we get there, I'm going to put a new action in here. So actions are these things on the left, and they are what allow you to create a workflow. So I'm going to add a conditional branch. I'm going to stick it right after this email here, which is where we're sending the email to let someone know that the that IT had completed their job. And I am going to take this set workflow status, and I'm going to move it over to here. So we're only going to create it if they are part of the sales or marketing department. So let's go set up that conditional branch information first. I'm going to hit configure. And so when the current item, so when I added that item to my list, when that current item's department equals marketing, they should get business cards. And I'll hit save. So when that is true, we're going to follow this yes branch. So I'm going to set the workflow status to creating the business cards. And I'm going to drag this whole proof business card process over here. And you'll note that it brought along all of the conditional branches here, including the document generation and Yammer message piece. Now, if I don't need to create a business card, I probably still want to let everyone know that the employee has joined the organization. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to move this Yammer message down to the bottom here, where regardless of whether we've created business cards for them or not, we're going to post this Yammer message. So with that, I have made a very simple but perhaps meaningful change to my business process, and I am able to then save and publish this, and it will take shape in any future requests that I have for new employees. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to show you is that when I created that new employee, if I click on new item here, I just get a simple screen. It's nothing very special. It just pops open a view where I've got last name, first name kind of down in a line. What if I wanted to make that a little more usable for my end user? I'm going to go click on New Hire Onboarding here, and I'm going to click on Nintech's Forms. So as I mentioned, we had the ability to create a custom form for the task that we were assigning to someone. We can also do that when we are creating a new list item. And so in this case, I'm going to choose the responsive designer. There are two designers that Nintex has. One is the classic designer, which is what has existed for years and years. And the other is a responsive designer, which allows you to create a form once and have it render dynamically based on the device that's in use, be it a full computer, a tablet, or a phone. So I'm going to go ahead and use the responsive designer. And this is going to bring up the interactive form design interface. So by default, it's going to pull all of the fields that I had on my form onto a form ready for me to update. And I'm just going to drag first name up to here, and I'm going to drag phone number over here, and job title over here. And now we've got, perhaps, in my opinion at least, a much more usable, user-friendly, I think I just invented a new word there, form that my end user can fill out. And so I'm just going to go ahead, say publish and close, and hit publish. And that's going to save it, it's going to publish it, and it's going to close the form designer so that I can go back to my screen for entering some new data. So now, when I click on the new icon, I instead get presented with a much nicer, cleaner user interface where I can start typing in information about the user, select their department, enter the information as appropriate. So with the combination of both the powerful workflow platform as well as the form platform, you have the ability to create some very usable, intelligent, and dynamic electronic form and workflow solutions for your business. So with that, I'm going to transition back to the deck. Before I do that, any more questions that have come through before I get away from the app?
Yeah, we did have someone who wanted to know if you're able to clarify a bit more the roles of SharePoint versus Nintex and how they relate to workflow.
Sure. SharePoint, as I mentioned, is a general purpose content management collaboration platform that many businesses use as a centralized repository for documents. It provides a web-based platform upon which many businesses will create their intranet. So a centralized place where people can go to find the information that they need. And the reason that we often use SharePoint as the, I guess the starting point for Nintex is that if I'm an employee and let's say, let's talk through the request a payment, request a check type of process that I mentioned earlier. If I'm an employee who has, just agreed to make a donation to, a particular charity, and now I need to request a payment, for that charity. I'm going to go to my intranet. I'm going to go to my web page, and I'm going to, go perhaps to finance. And within the finance site, I'll see some information, some documents, some links, etc. That's where I would go to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And then once I'm there, there would likely be a link to complete the check request form. And that's when I would click on it, and it would bring me to a list, much like we saw for the new employee onboarding scenario. And then I would, be off to the races, filling out the form and completing the workflow. Let me just go back here for point of reference. So all of this stuff, right? So the navigational elements at the top, the list here on the left, this little web part here showing me some of the Yammer content, the list, or rather the document library where I'm storing these business cards, that is all SharePoint functionality. And in fact, SharePoint has a workflow capability into and unto itself. And we've used that built-in workflow capability in the past. However, we have found that some of the complexity and some of the limitations in what you get with the out-of-the-box SharePoint forms and workflow capabilities are really challenges when you're trying to create a useful and usable solution for a business. And so that's why we partnered with Nintex a number of years ago, because their workflow platform provides a lot of the actions, the ability to integrate with, say, Yammer or Salesforce or CRM, the ability to create those if-else, form flow type interfaces much more easily, much more cost effectively than it does to do so using the native SharePoint workflow capabilities. Likewise, on the form side of things, the ability for an end user to customize that form as opposed to using a developer to customize it is also top of the list. So the Nintex workflow and forms solution, as I mentioned, sits on top of SharePoint and provides that form and workflow component. It doesn't provide any of this other stuff for managing the content. If you wanted to use the Nintex Workflow Cloud, then that gives you a standalone set of capabilities for managing the initiation and completion of those of your workflows in a platform that does not require SharePoint. But we've seen that the use of both together provides a really great solution for most of our clients. Okay, great. So to wrap up, let's go back here. We started talking about, so why Nintex? There was a study that Forrester conducted, commissioned by Nintex, to look at some of the potential return on investment. And what they found was that when they look at how customers who have deployed the Nintex Workflow and Form platform, they've achieved 176% return on investment, payback in 10.5 months, 8 to 15% gains in employee productivity, and they've avoided custom coding costs. Now, speaking from personal experience, I've seen even better ROI and even shorter payback periods where there have been significant cost and/or time components being addressed through those workflows. So I mentioned that credit line approval piece. The company was actually losing customers because they were not approving their request quick enough. So the creation of that one form and workflow had an immediate payback and significant ROI with just the very first customer that they didn't lose because they were having that credit line approval request approved, in a matter of hours. So there can be some really significant short-term and high returns by using the platform. But generally speaking, across the board, I think these are pretty good numbers. There are some ancillary benefits as well that by using this, it's easy, as you saw, to make changes. So when you reach the conclusion that, hey, not everyone needs business cards, it's pretty easy to change the workflow around. And the fact that you don't need to be an IT expert means that there's less reliance on the IT department to automate some of these things, which can help speed the pace of adoption and enablement in the business. So I mentioned earlier in response to the question about Salesforce, whether or not there are integrations with other systems. And we touched on just one specific component, the Nintech Workflow platform. Nintech as an organization really is a process platform company. There are often hundreds of business systems and applications that power your business today. The challenge, though, is where each of them may have their own special capability, connecting the data between those systems together, along with the people who actually need that information to get their work done, that is sort of the silver bullet. And that's where we've seen some of the most significant benefit by using the Nintech platform. So here is just a sampling of some of the systems that we can integrate with and have integrated with as it relates to the Nintech platform. So you see Salesforce and Dynamics CRM up there with the CRM. Out-of-the-box integrations with things like Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, document creation, both through the use of the document generation feature that I mentioned, a specific document generation capability specifically designed for Salesforce, as well as the new signature integration, electronic signature integration that exists in the platform. Certainly integration with the Office apps. You saw the example that I presented with the document generation feature, creating that business card docx file, and so on around the circles here. So once you identify the fact that you have all of these systems that you can integrate with, then the question is, how do you use Nintex to solve for that? The first thing you need to do is be able to map and manage your processes. If you don't know how a process works, if you don't know what's involved, if you don't know who does what, then it's going to be really hard to automate that. So that's where Nintech's ProMap comes in. It's a process management tool, and it allows employees to capture what they do, collaborate with others to make sure that the documentation that they've created is consistently up to date, and also make suggestions for improving that, which can get routed to the appropriate people to make those necessary changes. That ProMap solution was recently introduced to the Nintex platform about a year or two ago. Once you've got a handle on those processes, then you can start automating them. So we talked a lot about the Forms, Mobile, and Workflow Automation solution. There is also a document automation and e-signature solution, which I mentioned. And then a more recent entry to the Nintech's portfolio of products is a robotic process automation platform. Robotic process automation allows you to take various disparate business processes where you are interacting with systems, where those systems may not have an API, may not have a way to integrate via code. And robotic process automation allows you to essentially create a virtual person who clicks through and types in information and navigates an application to automate a particular business process. And it has a significant impact where you're doing a lot of double data entry. You can nearly eliminate that through the use of an RPA solution. Excuse me. Once you've got those processes automated, the next question you will likely ask is, well, how are we doing? Have we automated well? Have we created bottlenecks or at least uncovered them? Is there opportunity for us to improve? And that's where Nintech's analytics comes into play, where you can get some advanced process level reporting, understanding how business processes are running, where perhaps they're taking too long, and then you can kind of circle back to the map and manage process feature to make changes to that business process with ProMap, and then recycle through implementing those with the rest of the platform. So at the end of the day, there are a whole host of capabilities that the product platform can provide. We at Bloom have been working with this platform to really help a business focus on those processes that often get in the way, no one wants to deal with, but can best benefit the business because they're getting done consistently and transparently. And so to that end, what we'd like to do is offer anyone who's interested a Process Excellence in a Day workshop. It's a one-day workshop where we will come in, we will spend the first part of the day working with you to understand some of the simple business processes that you might have. And it's quite likely that we've already dealt with many of them because a lot of these simple processes like employee onboarding, request approvals, credit line approvals, payment approvals, etc., are things that every business has. We will work with you, though, to understand your specific process, map it out using ProMap to demonstrate how that tool can work. And then from there, we will transition into creating a solution using the Nintech's Workflow and Forms platform to automate that particular process and leave you with a working solution in a trial environment that will hopefully demonstrate some of the power, the capability, and the ease of use of the platform. And that is something that you'll be able to sign up for and request with the email that you'll be receiving as a follow-up to this webinar. That email will contain a link to a form where you can fill out the appropriate information, and from there we will get in contact with you to schedule your workshop. With that, I will turn it back over to Jared and see if we have any questions.
No, I think we're good for right now. So thank you for everyone who attended today. You'll see that email coming out tomorrow that'll have the recording for you and the form to sign up for the workshop. So thank you to everyone who attended today.